My son-in-law left his 2 daughters at my old house, saying he would be back in 4 hours. He never returned. 8 years later, he sued me for kidnapping his children. But when I handed the judge the envelope, he asked me, "Do they know what's inside?" I replied, "Not yet. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. If I come up short today, I could lose my granddaughters to the cold and to a man who mistakes cruelty for discipline, and I won't let that happen on my watch." The wrench skipped my knuckles and rang off the concrete like a dinner bell. I was bent over the old corn cleaner, back hollering the way a good back does at my age, when gravel started whispering under unfamiliar tires. Out here 3 miles past Riverside, uninvited company might as well be lightning. You count the seconds and decide whether to duck. I wiped grease on a rag that had lived in my pocket longer than some politicians lasted in office, and looked through the dusty window. A red sedan eased out from behind the windbreak of oaks, nosed up to my porch, and clicked itself quiet. Heat shimmered off the hood. Dust hung in the air like an uncertain verdict. He got out. 8 years is long enough to forget a voice, but not a silhouette. Thinner, sharper, expensive blazer that fit like it was supposed to impress someone. Dark circled eyes. Key fidget. That whole posture you learn when you've been practicing a speech in the visor mirror. David Morse, my late daughter's widower, the man who once left 2 sleeping girls in my house and drove away, under a sky that didn't deserve to see it. I stepped out of the garage with the wrench still in my hand. Not a threat, just punctuation. Boots on gravel. Crunch. Crunch. I put myself between him and the front door because that's where I belong in this world. Right between trouble and the people I love. "David," I said. He turned and pasted on a smile that never reached his eyes. "Margaret, you look well. What do you want?" "My children?" His chin rose. He'd rehearsed those 2 words. I could hear the capital letters. My grip tightened until my knuckles went white. For 8 years, Emma and Claire had run this ground with their cleats and bare feet and homework and laughter. They were my girls now, not because I stole them, but because love is measured in what you carry at 2 a.m. "You lost the right to call them that," I said, "when you put the accelerator where your spine should have been." He flinched, then smoothed it over. "I was sick, Margaret. Grief is an illness. I needed time." 8 years' worth. Wind brushed through the corn. Somewhere a crow argued with a fence post. He glanced at the windows like memories might be pressed to the glass while watching him. "I'm better now," he said, "and I want my daughters back. You need to leave my property. We'll see." The smile returned, colder now, and he walked back to the car like he owned the ground and the air above it. "This isn't over." He drove away, taillights blinking through the oaks, leaving me with the long breath a woman takes when she's not sure whether to pray or cuss. I did both quietly. Inside, the kitchen did what it always does. Caught me. Kettle on, filters and scoops. The smell of grocery store coffee that's seen me through more storms than the weather radio. On the fridge was Michelle in uniform, 22 and invincible. The way photographs lie to us. She never got to be as old as I am. Cancer does not negotiate, and it does not keep records of promises made at bedsides. That was a decade ago, and by the end of that winter, I was a widow raising 2 girls whose father had turned to mist. The coffee burned my tongue and steadied my hands. Late sun fell through the gingham curtains my husband hung back, when money and time and stamina all balanced out pretty fair. I remember David sitting in Michelle's chair, grief like a stone he refused to set down. I remembered the smell of cheap whiskey and something sharper when he stumbled to my porch one night and tried to climb the stairs to wake the girls. Remembered how Emma and Little, Claire watched from halfway down the staircase, clutching each other the way sisters do when the world turns slippery. Before I could sink too deep into those rooms, the bus whined at the bend. Doors hissed, voices, the thud of book bags up the steps. My day picked up speed. "Hey, Grandma." Emma taller by the week, softball cap in her hand, eyes my daughter's eyes. Claire followed close, paint on her fingers again because art class sticks to her as hard as dust sticks to a farmer. Wash up, apples on the counter, I said. Routine is the furniture you can lie down on when the floor turns to ice. Emma raided the fridge, poured milk like she owned the dairy. Coach says if I keep working on my drop ball, I might make varsity next year. That's so, I said, and it felt good to hear that normal future in her voice. Claire spread a watercolor on the table, our farmhouse with a sky so blue it hurt. 3 stick figures in the yard. She'd labeled them Margaret, Emma, Claire. No room left for anything else. I swallowed hard around a knot. We did homework. We ate meatloaf because some foods remind your bones that they're safe. We argued kindly about chores and screen time, which is how you know a family is breathing. Underneath it, my mind kept stepping on the same nail. The car, the smile, the words. After dishes, after teeth, after lights. I sat in the kitchen with the day's quiet and watched the porch light make an island on the stoop. The phone rang right on schedule, the way a person calls when they've checked a clock and an agenda. "Did you get the papers?" David asked. "No hello?" Business voice. The kind that wears cologne like armor. "What papers?" "You'll see." The postman came early the next morning and he didn't leave it in the box. That's how you know a letter thinks it's important. Certified. My signature looked like an old tractor trail across a muddy field. Thick packet. Law firm from the city. Words I have learned to mistrust. Unlawful detention. Custodial interference. Best interests. The kind of language that turns love into ink and ink into fear. I read it once standing, once sitting, once more with both fists planted on the table so my hands wouldn't shake. The phone rang 10 minutes later. He had timed it to the minute like you time a roast. "Meet me at 3, he said. "Oak Street Diner. We can settle this quietly, or the court will." Click. I dressed like a woman going to town for fence staples. Not war. Clean shirt, good boots, comb-through hair that still remembers where it's supposed to lie. I tucked an old envelope into my jacket, the one I've carried like a talisman since the night the house became quieter. I couldn't explain why I never threw it away. Maybe because sometimes the only thing heavier than a truth is a secret. The diner clattered and hissed and smelled like coffee that had been on since dawn. Barry Hill topped off mugs with the kind of care you only learn after a lot of mornings. "You look like a woman who needs pie, Margaret," he said softly, and I smiled like a woman who might. David slid into the booth at 3 on the dot. Black suit, manicure that could slice paper. The light caught his hair just so. I wondered how long he'd practiced the angle. "You look tired," he said like he was offering a diagnosis. "Raising girls will do that." $500,000, he said straight to the point. "Wire transfer? I disappear permanently." His smile barely showed teeth. "Or I take them. You're old isolated. Courts like fathers who rehabilitate." The number hung in the space between us. It had no business in a room with lunch specials and a chalkboard. Menu my coffee tasted like bitterness and stubbornness and 50 harvests worth of weather. "Where were you when Emma broke her leg sliding into home?" I asked. "When Claire coughed so hard they kept her overnight, and I counted the beeps on a machine so I wouldn't count my failures." "I was sick," he said, eyes flat. "I'm better now. You have 48 hours to decide." He set a 20 by the sugar caddy so the world could see he pays his way, and left on shoes that clicked like a metronome for bad choices. Barry hovered. "You want that pie now?" "I want my girls," I said. "Pie wouldn't hurt." On the drive home, cornfields unspooled under a sky that had the decency to be clear. The steering wheel felt like a handhold on a moving train. By the time the driveway straightened in front of me, I had my plan for tonight, which was the only plan I can ever trust. I waited until homework was spread, and dinner was over, and the kitchen smelled like dish soap. Then I took the remote, clicked off the TV, and sat across from them at the coffee table where we've built model rockets and slotted puzzles and futures. "Girls," I said, and my voice tried to be kinder than the words. "Your father came by." Emma went very still, like a deer that's seen a shadow. Claire's mouth opened, then closed like she'd had a question for 8 years and just found out she could ask it. "He wants to talk to you," I said. "And more than talk. He's filed papers, says I kept you from him, says you belong with him." Silence has a sound when it's that big. The click of the clock, a house settling, the way your own breath feels like you're borrowing it. "He can't just—" Emma started, anger pulling her shoulders tight. "He left." "He was hurting," I said, "because both things can be true, and mercy doesn't cost me any love for my girls. But this is our life. What you want matters." Claire looked at the floor, at her socks, at the place between her shoes where the truth lives. "Can we meet him but still stay here?" That hopeful, careful way 13 asks for 2 impossible things. "We might have to see him," I said. "But where you live, that's what I'll fight for." Emma nodded so hard her neck creaked. "I'm not going anywhere, Grandma. This is home." "Me neither," Claire said, taking her sister's cue like she always has, then finding her own words. "I want to stay." I didn't know a woman could feel relief in her elbows, but I did. We moved to the kitchen table because that's where decisions get made in decent houses. I made cocoa for them and coffee for me. We talked about what lawyers do and what judges care about. Routine, school, health, stability, truth. We talked about how people can be sick in ways you can't fix with soup and a blanket. We talked about telling the truth without cruelty. When they went upstairs, footsteps like a blessing, I pulled the old envelope from my jacket. Paper goes thin when you fold and unfold it over the years, like a map of places you never wanted to visit again. The ink was his hand. The words were the night he'd chosen to disappear. "Margaret, I can't be the father they deserve. Every day I look at them is another day I fail." Michelle's memory. "Take them, raise them, love them the way I can't anymore. They're yours now." David, I'd kept it because I knew without, knowing there'd come a day when the truth would need a body to wear into a room. I slid it back into the envelope and put it where important things live, inside the jacket of a woman who's not done yet. Before bed, I walked the fence line out of habit I don't intend to break. Night had come on clean and quick, stars like nails in a dark board. The house glowed behind me. Lamp in the living room. A rectangle of yellow under each girl's door. Coyotes sang far off. Owls answered. Out here you learn which sounds mean trouble, and which just mean the world is doing what it's supposed to. Tonight the world mostly behaved. Back inside I washed my hands, the grease of the morning finally giving up the fight, and looked at Michelle's photo again. "I'm keeping my promise, honey," I told her. "And I don't care what anyone thinks about an old woman talking to a picture." On the porch, the swing creaked the way it always has. I sat with the envelope in my lap and watched the breath rise off my mug. It were ours, money or children. That was the bargain I'd been offered by someone who'd forgotten that love is a kind of stubbornness God put in old women to make up for what time takes from their knees. I don't have $500,000. What I do have is a farm paid down with sweat, a town that knows who showed up, a spine that still remembers what straight feels like, ink on paper that says out loud what everyone learned the hard way, and I have 2 girls sleeping upstairs who already chose. That's enough for tonight. Tomorrow I'll make calls. One to an attorney whose name I got from the school secretary, another to an old friend who knows how to find people, and the shadows they leave behind. I'll gather attendance sheets, report cards, immunization records, the boring paper that proves loving court. I'll ask Barry to remember what was said in a booth at 3 Hour Shop. I'll tell my neighbor Walter that if anyone comes sniffing around with questions, he can serve them coffee and send them to me. I'll stack truth like cordwood and wait for the frost to test it. For now, I lock the doors that don't really need locking in a place like this, and I turn off lights one by one until only the hall lamp is left, the one that says we live here but we're not afraid. I climb the stairs slow because old knees are honest. At the top, I stand between two doors, like I did when they were small, and the bad dreams were bigger, and I listen to their sleep. I am an old woman with a good heart and a bad back and a house that still smells like supper. I'm not rich in the way he wants, but I am wealthy, in things a court can count if someone shows it to them properly. Tomorrow I'll start counting for them. Tonight I mark down this one small victory. The girls chose home. The cold can bark at the windows if it wants. Cruel men can wrap themselves in big words like discipline. I have something better. I have what we built here. And I have a note in my pocket that tells the truth in his own hand. That's enough to sleep on. The sun came up honest and noisy as if it had plans for me whether I liked them or not. I called the school secretary right after I packed lunches. 2 turkey sandwiches, one with mustard drawn like a lightning bolt, because Claire says that makes it faster to eat. She gave me the name she'd promised. James Parker, Family Law, the one people whisper about when they don't want to lose what matters. He's not flashy, the secretary said. He's effective. I shaved close and put on the jacket with the soft elbows, the one my husband used to call my church armor. I left the girls with a list and a kiss to the top of each head, as they pretended not to like it. On the drive into town, the fields were the same fields as yesterday, the way you know your whole life by heart, and still double-check the words. Parker's office sat over the hardware store, 2 flights up a narrow stair that kept secrets like old wood. The sign on the frosted glass door was plain. J. Parker, attorney inside. A plant tried its best by the window, and a bookshelf looked like it had been read, which I counted in his favor before we even shook hands. Mrs. Halpern, he said, standing. Mid-40s, clean-shaven, practical tie, eyes that didn't blink for drama. His handshake matched the room. No velvet, no nails. Just present. Call me Margaret, I said, and sat where he pointed. He didn't waste my time with sympathy as decoration. He asked for facts. I gave him 8 years of them. Slow and careful. School records, doctor visits, photographs of birthdays and bad haircuts. The night David left and the morning since. When I told him about the red car and the diner and the cash ultimatum, a muscle feathered once along his jaw. When I slid the old envelope across the desk, David's hand, David's words. He put on gloves from a drawer and handled it like it was both ordinary paper and a live wire. Do you have the original? He asked. That's it. Then we'll make 2 certified copies and lock this up. He tapped the bottom corner where the ink had bled a little. I want a forensic handwriting expert to confirm. And I want to know where he's been for 8 years. Rehab, county, a new life with a new name. Rachel Torres still works the private side, I said. She used to find things for a living and people for cash. Call her. Tell her I'll send the scope in writing by afternoon. He clicked his pen. Opposing counsel, Whitcomb and Crane LLP, city firm. Letter full of words that don't smell like anything real. He nodded, not impressed by big names. They filed for emergency temporary custody. Hearing set for a week from Tuesday. That clock is not our friend. I have 48 hours to come up with $500,000, or he says he'll take them, I said, and the number still sounded like a joke, the kind a man tells when he doesn't know what human beings cost. Don't pay him, Parker said flat. If you do, it looks like you believe he has a claim to sell. We'll offer supervised visitation, a short session in a neutral location with me present. It shows good faith. Meanwhile, we stack what a judge respects. Stability, continuity, community witnesses who've seen you parent, medical and school records, the note authenticated. Can a judge see the girls? I asked, hating the idea of their voices being measured by strangers. Sometimes, but I prefer their steadiness to speak for them on paper. He slid me a checklist that looked like it ate weekends. We'll need affidavits. Mr. Walter Green next door. Barry Hill at the diner. Ms. Harris, principal, on attendance and behavior. Dr. Mitchell for pediatric records. If there's been any police involvement connected to their father, calls for welfare checks, disturbances, Officer Warren can certify reports. I thought about our quiet street and how sound carries in winter. We've kept the bad out of the girls' hearing, I said, and we keep doing that. He leaned in, elbow on the desk. Margaret, I'm going to say something you already know. Family court's not about punishing an old harm. It's about protecting a present life. We don't have to prove he was a bad father 8 years ago. We have to prove you're a good home now. I can do that, I said, calm under the part of me that wanted to roar. His retainer number was not as rude as David's, but it was still a number with commas in it. I told him what I could access without selling the pasture, and he looked past the money to the woman across from him, which is what good people do. I'll phase the billing, he said. We'll put most hours on hold until after the hearing. I want this on the merits. You like winning? I said. I like keeping kids where they're safe, he replied. You strike me as a woman who's done that a long time without any help from the court. He made the certified copies while I watched, sealed the real letter into a red-topped evidence envelope, and slid a paper across for my signature. If he contacts you, you send him to me. Don't meet alone again, and tell your girls as much truth as they can carry, and not an ounce more. I left with a folder heavy enough to make my arm feel the day. On the sidewalk, the town was the same old town pretending to be new. I leaned against the truck, dialed a number I hadn't dialed in years, and waited through the long ring that usually means a person has changed everything except their phone. Torres, a voice said. Same grit, same road dust. Rachel, it's Margaret Halpin. A pause, then a warmth that made me wish we were sharing coffee on the tailgate. I thought you were calling to invite me to a quiet retirement, she said. Tell me I'm wrong. You're wrong, I said and told her enough. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, she exhaled like a taut wire relaxing. I'll start with county and state databases, she said. Then I'll ask the people who talk after midnight. Send me the formal scope from your lawyer so I don't break anything fragile. I'll text you his info. And Rachel, watch your six these next few days. People who think they're owed something, get creative. I'll mind my doors, I said, and hung up. The rest of the morning became errands with a purpose. Dr. Mitchell had me sign one form and then pressed a hand to my forearm the way a person does when they've seen you in waiting. Rooms you didn't want to be in. The girls are up to date, healthy, and attached, she said. That's clinical and human. She promised the affidavit by tomorrow. At the school, Ms. Harris met me in her office with a poster of a bald eagle for company. She looked like she liked rules and made room in them for people. Emma's a leader, she said. The kind people follow without resenting it. Claire's an artist who turns in her math on time. I can't testify to your cooking, Margaret, but I can say the girls are steady. That's rare enough. I'd frame it. She printed attendance charts, grade summaries, and put her name on everything in ink that looked happy to be used. At the diner, Barry wiped his hands on his apron and nodded before I even finished asking. I was there, he said. Heard every word he said at that booth. I'll write it neat and swear to it with my best pen. Across the street, Walter answered his door with the chain on because he reads the news. Come in, dear, he said after he saw me. His house smelled like fresh bread and strict opinions. Those girls are yours in everything but blood, he told me. I've seen you in snow and fever. I'll put my name to that. By mid-afternoon, my folder had grown fat with paper, that was dull in the way a judge loves. I drove home feeling like a woman stacking wood before a storm. Still vulnerable, still small under a sky that doesn't care, but better than being empty-handed. I was halfway up the porch steps when my phone buzzed with the school's number. "Margaret," Harris said, voice tight. "I wanted you to hear it from me. A man matching your description of David was outside the fence at dismissal talking to students. He didn't speak to your girls. We moved them out the side, but he was visible. The old anger tried to stand up inside me, but I kept it on a leash. Thank you," I said. "I'll loop counsel," I called Parker. "He's fishing," James said, which means he's not confident he'll net anything in court. "I'll send a letter demanding all contact go through me and proposing the supervised visit. You okay with that?" "I'm okay if the girls are okay," I said, feeling my jaw lock the way a vice does when you turn it too far. "Then let's call the girls," he said, and there was a human softness there I hadn't expected. "We'll do this right." I waited until homework and dinner in the kitchen, safe, usual. "We sat where we'd sat last night. Your father was near school today," I told them, and watched their faces do the math. "He didn't talk to you because the school stepped in. Mr. Parker's arranging a supervised visit for this weekend. 30 minutes neutral room. I'll be there. A counselor will be there. If you don't want to hug, you don't hug. If you don't want to talk, you don't talk. If you want to say one thing and be done, you say it, and we go for milkshakes. Your choice matters more than anyone else's." Emma's shoulders squared. "If we have to do it, we do it," she said. "But I'm not promising to feel anything." "You don't have to," I said. Claire studied her socks again. "Can I draw while he talks?" she asked, and the kindness of the question hurt. "You can bring your sketchbook. You can draw the whole time." They both nodded, each girl building her own little boat for the river ahead. The phone chimed. A text from Rachel.County. 1 rehab intake under alias in 2019. Left AMA. 2 misdemeanor disturbances in 2020. No convictions. Current lease month-to-month city-side. Will send fuller report by morning. I stared at the words until they stopped swimming. Rehab, leaving against medical advice. Disturbances. The kind of history a good attorney can turn into a story about a man who tried. And the kind a judge can read and decide it's still not enough. The world is complicated. About mercy. I forwarded the text to Parker, who answered the way good professionals do. 2 minutes later with a plan. "Thanks. I'll subpoena records where admissible. Confirmed visitation Saturday 11 a.m. Pinewood Community Center room. B, I'll be present. Bring the letter if you want it within reach. Don't show it unless we need it." I cleaned the kitchen like shining the counters would make the future behave. Dishes, sink, towel, the ordinary litany. After the girls were upstairs, Walter knocked with a pie plate and a document he'd typed so hard the letters looked brave. "I put in the time you got up in the ice storm to take Claire to urgent care," he said, not meeting my eyes because some tenderness is better handed over plain. "And the time you ran the bases with Emma with that bad knee of yours because she needed to laugh. Not mope. Thank you," I said, taking both pie and paper like sacraments. At 9, the porch light drew moths and 1 stray beetle and my neighbor's cat. I sat on the swing with my spine arguing and reread Parker's list. On the bottom, he'd handwritten something that wasn't a law. You aren't alone. It wasn't like him to decorate a page with comfort. Maybe he'd learned that people sometimes need the obvious said out loud. I slept like a woman who expects to be woken, and morning obliged. Officer Warren knocked just after 7, his cruiser a posture in the driveway. He stood on the porch with his hat in his hands, exactly the way some men stand when they want to be welcome. "Margaret," he said, "just checking in. We had a call last night. Anonymous tip claiming minors in your home were being alienated from their father. We get those in custody tussles. I figured I'd come by myself instead of sending a new kid who'd track mud over your rugs." "Want coffee?" I asked. "I won't say no." We sat at the kitchen table because justice tastes like whatever you pour in a chipped mug. I told him about the hearing, the visit, the letter without showing it, and the red sedan idling like a threat. He took notes the way a person does when they intend to do something about what they write. "I'll put a patrol car swing past a few extra times a night," he said. "Nothing dramatic, just eyes. And if he shows up here, you call it in, and then call me. My number's on the card, Margaret." He paused, looking toward the stairs where the morning thump of girls happened. "We see who shows up. That counts for something in this town." After he left, I packed the folder into a briefcase I hadn't used since the funeral a decade back. The leather remembered my hand. By Friday, we had a stack of affidavits that looked like we were building a paper fort. Dr. Mitchell came through as promised, with calm sentences that made the girls sound like what they are. Harris sent a letter so crisp, my old English teacher's ghost nodded. Barry's handwriting tilted uphill like hope. Walter's was firm as a fence post set right. Warren attached call logs with the kind of official language that floats or sinks people in a courtroom. Rachel's preliminary report arrived in a clean PDF. I printed because I trust paper more than air. The hard part wasn't the paperwork. It was keeping the hours before Saturday from souring. The girls went to school, did their routines, came home, practiced. Emma threw drop balls against the old hay barn, while I pretended my eyes didn't sting from the dust she raised. Claire painted the creek at dusk, and got the cattails right and the light nearly so. At dinner Friday night, we talked about mundane things on purpose. The way bread behaves in the toaster. How the dog, too, farms over, insists on chasing his own. Tail and still seems surprised. We set out clothes. For the morning like it was just any Saturday with a chore list and a ball game and not a 30-minute room in the middle of it. Before bed, I ironed my shirt the way my husband taught me. Shoulders, collar, sleeves, front, back. I put the red-topped evidence envelope into the briefcase and closed the brass clasps with a little click that sounds like a vow. I checked the list Parker had texted one more time. Arrived 10 minutes early. Girls choose chairs. I do the introductions. If you need to leave, we leave. You don't apologize for boundaries you taught to keep them safe. I walked the hall and stopped between their doors again. Behind one, the scratch of pencil on paper. Behind the other, the soft thud of a softball landing in a glove. Rhythm steady as a metronome set to, "We're okay." I put a hand on each doorframe like consecration. I am not a young woman. My back has a weather map carved into it. My hands remember wrenches and winters. But I have learned the muscle that matters most is the one that keeps you from saying yes when a no protects your people. Paper cuts sting. Courtrooms are cold. But Saturday at 11 is a room, and the three of us will walk in, and 30 minutes later we will walk out, and nothing essential about who we are will have changed. That truth fit into my chest like a steadying hand. I turned off the hall light and let the house breathe. Outside, a fox's quick shadow crossed the yard, uninterested in human dramas. The night did what nights do, and in the morning we would do what we do. Saturday came up spare and gray, the kind of morning that keeps its opinions to itself. We ate toast and eggs because a woman does better with something in her stomach when she's about to ask her heart to behave. I wore the ironed shirt and the jacket with the soft elbows. Emma put on the red cap she says is lucky. Claire slid her sketchbook into her backpack like a talisman. The Pinewood Community Center smells like floor wax and old trophies. James Parker was already there outside room B, a legal pad under his arm, sleeves rolled, hair pulled back the way people do when they expect the day to tug. Beside him stood a man with calm in his bones. Margaret, girls. This is Marcus Reed, licensed family counselor, James said. He crouched to bring his eyes level with Claire's. You can sit wherever you want. Draw if you like. If at any point this doesn't feel okay, you look at me and we'll pause. Emma gave the smallest nod a woman can give and still mean it. Inside, the room was beige on purpose. Round table, 4 chairs, a box of tissues placed exactly where people are likely to need them. I let the girls choose chairs, then took a place at their side. James sat at an angle, not crowding, his pen already poised. Marcus took the corner by the clock. David entered at 11 on the dot. No cologne, no fussy jewelry. A cardigan softer than I remembered him ever choosing. He carried something small and metal in his palm, the way a person holds a coin or a key when they're not sure if it's protection or temptation. Hello, Emma. Hello, Claire. He said their names like he expected them to crack and pour out into his hands. The girls answered with a pair of polite hellos that meant, "We are here because we said we'd be here." "I'm Mr. Parker," James said, voice even. "We have 30 minutes. This is supervised. If there's anything the girls don't want to answer, they won't. We'll keep it short and simple." David nodded. He looked older. Of course he did. Life etches itself on faces. That's its favorite canvas. He put the medal on the table. It was a sobriety chip. 2 years. "I've been sober 731 days, he said, catching my glance and correcting with a dry smile that didn't land anywhere near his eyes. "+1. I count them." No one reached for the coin. Emma kept her cap brim pointed toward neutral ground. Claire opened her sketchbook and drew the round table, the square clock, the circle of the coin, shapes she could control. "I brought these," David said, pulling out 2 small boxes, hinged tin, the kind you might keep buttons in. He slid one toward each girl. "Photos from when you were little, just things I kept safe." He looked at me briefly. Not a challenge, a check. I watched the girls. Emma glanced at James, who nodded once. She opened her tin. A photo of her in a ridiculous pumpkin outfit grinned up. Claire's box held a hospital bracelet, a single sock, a picture of the 3 of them on a blanket. She stared at the bracelet like it might ring if she listened hard enough. "I know I left," he said. "I was sick. Not a cold you can sweat out. A different kind. I let grief use my spine as a rope. I made terrible choices. He stopped, swallowed. "I'm seeing a counselor. I have a job at Northside Market. I've had a home study. It says my apartment is a safe environment. I'm not asking you to forget. I'm asking to start with a hello and move very slowly forward." Emma found her voice first. "You didn't leave a note," she said. "Not for us." I felt the weight of the red-topped envelope in my briefcase like a hot stone. "I should have," he said. "The worst things I've done all come from should-haves." He looked at Claire. "Can I see what you're drawing?" Claire turned the sketchbook so he could. She'd drawn the table with 4 circles around it. Ours were heavy, shaded. His was a faint outline. "It's okay if mine stays light for a long time," he said softly. Marcus glanced at the clock. 20 minutes. David took the cue. "I'll let you ask me one thing if you want," he said. "Or 0. 0 is a perfectly fine number." Emma asked something I didn't expect. "What do you do at night when you come home?" "Like your routine? I make tea. I water a fern I'm a little too proud of keeping alive. I call my sponsor." I read. He smiled with no teeth this time. "I burn grilled cheese more often than I'd like. I set my alarm earlier than I need to so I can talk myself into the day twice." Claire said, "Do you remember the dog we used to see at the fair? The 3-legged one. Tripod," he said, too fast for that to be a put-on. "He belonged to the Wilsons. He liked funnel cake more than was good for him." Claire nodded, satisfied at least that some files in his head hadn't been corrupted. Time ran out the way it does when you're watching it. Marcus stood, gentle and firm. "Let's pause here," he said. "We can talk about another visit after today is digested." David didn't reach. That mattered. He gathered the empty space in his hands like thread and nodded. "Thank you for seeing me," he said. "I'll be around when you're ready for more hello." We left as a clump, the way families do when they haven't agreed on whether to be seen. In the hall, a woman leaned against the bulletin board like she'd grown there. Rachel Torres. "Old denim, clean boots, Eyes that have been paid to notice. Got something you'll want, she said, lifting a manila envelope. Didn't want to text these. James angled his body to give the girls privacy. Go grab juice from the machine, I said. 2 each. Call it a windfall. When the girls drifted toward the vending machines, Rachel handed me the envelope. Inside, glossy prints. A long lens shot from outside the school earlier in the week. David by the fence, face tight, talking not to students, but to a woman in a county windbreaker handing him pamphlets. Another photo. David outside a downtown building talking to a woman whose suit cost more than my truck's last repair. The caption written on the back in Rachel's square hand, Whitcomb and Crane Associate, name Rebecca Sullivan, and another. David leaving a church basement at 10:43 p.m., flanked by women whose faces were old friends with fluorescent lighting. Nothing dirty, Rachel said. No bar exits. He's been logging meetings. Sponsor checks out. But this woman Sullivan shows up where he is a lot. She's not just counsel. She's around, romantically, James asked, watching more than the photographs. Don't know. Don't love the overlap. We can't make innuendo our strategy, James murmured. But we can make boundaries, Rachel cleared her throat. There's one more. She slid out a photo of a clipboard on a desk, shot through a window at an angle. Department of Children and Families. Home study. Preliminary approval. Date 3 weeks ago. A sticky note with a smiley face. I felt the building shift under my feet. Approval? I asked too loud. Preliminary, Rachel said. They checked boxes. Occupancy, smoke alarms, fridge with food. Doesn't say anything about history or sense. James took the photo, lips thinning. Preliminary won't decide a custody petition, he said, as if reminding himself. But judges like tidy stamps. The girls came back with juice and the delight of bending a machine to your will. We walked to the truck as a unit, the envelope under my arm growing heavier with each step. At home, we did the only thing that makes sense after a morning like that. We mowed part of the lawn. There's a particular mercy in straight lines made, where chaos was. Emma handled the riding mower like a woman who respects blades, clair-edged with a concentration that made the world shrink to string and grass and the smell of green. I took the push mower to the stubborn corners because there are jobs that belong to me. After we ate sandwiches on the steps and let the sun work on our backs. How do you feel? I asked them, because asking is a kind of shelter. Like I shook hands with a thunderstorm, Emma said. Like I drew a ghost, Claire said. Then, after a beat, a nice one, but still a ghost. I told them that was good and sufficient. By too loud, Parker's email rolled in like weather. Opposing counsel has filed a supplemental brief, affidavit from a psychiatrist and a counselor, plus that preliminary home study. They're moving to expand visitation pre-hearing and to admit a declaration from Mr. Morse stating that the letter you possess was written while intoxicated and under duress and should be excluded. They've noticed their own handwriting expert who will say inconclusive. I read it twice and felt the axle shift. Our straightest road had just developed a curve. I called James. He answered mid-breath. It's a good tactic, he said, not wasting my time by pretending otherwise. They want to make the letter smell unreliable. If the judge buys that, our cleanest piece of history turns into mud, and the home study lets them say, we're not uprooting, we're expanding. Can they expand without us agreeing? They can ask. I'll argue that we're already meeting in a controlled way, and that anything more risks destabilizing the girls. I'll move for an in-camera interview with the judge. Short, private, no lawyers, so their voices are heard without spectacle. I'll also file our own expert notice on the letter. My guy's slower but better. I want him on the record. I set my palm on the red-topped envelope, felt the ridges of the clasp like braille. The truth is in here, I said. Useless to say and necessary to say. It is, he said. But a courtroom likes truth with credentials. We'll give it those. I looked at the clock. Time was a dog that wouldn't come when called. James, I said, if the judge hears that he's sober and has a stamp from the state, how do I not look like an old woman clinging to what isn't hers? You look like what you are, he said. The person who's been a parent every day for 8 years. Judges care about momentum. They care about continuity. We are not arguing he's a monster. We are arguing that sudden change is. He paused. Margaret, I'm going to ask you for something hard. Don't talk to David about the letter. Don't let the girls carry that particular weight. We use it in court, not as a brick in a hallway. I can manage that, I said, and hung up before the part of me that wants to announce my weapons to the world could argue. At 4, Rachel texted again. One more oddity. Sullivan, associate at Whitcomb, co-signed David's lease. Landlord confirmed. Paperwork attached. She sent a photo of a form with 2 names in dark ink. The line where other people sign their names is where you learn who intends to stick around. I forwarded the image to Parker. His reply came quick. Useful for bias and improper influence if they try to parade independent recommendations. Not decisive. Still good to know where the threads run. The girls and I did chores like we were discovering them for the first time. There's a particular holiness in clean tack and a barn swept to its corners. We fed the neighbors' chickens because Walter had a church thing. We waved at Officer Warren when his cruiser idled past. Just eyes, like he said. Normal stayed within reach if you kept your hand out. Evening came. Deliberate. I put chili on because chili fills a house like the idea of warmth does. After we ate, we sat at the table with homework and pencils, and the quiet that work makes. When they were upstairs and the water ran and the old house sang the pipes hymn, I took the envelope out. I set it on the table, then beside the table, then back on the table like a woman negotiating with her own caution. I slid the letter free. Margaret, I can't be the father they deserve. They're yours now, his hand, his slant. The line where he pressed too hard writing yours so the ink bled and the paper remembers. That line is what the day had been about. I understood suddenly. The line between a goodbye and a beginning. The line a judge will be asked to draw between mercy and safety. The line I have the right and the duty to hold. I called Marcus, the counselor, because I wanted a civilian truth. How did you read today? I asked. He didn't varnish. Your girls were protected by their routine and by you. They were curious and guarded and polite. Their father was appropriate. He didn't push. He showed evidence of sobriety and insight. That won't erase 8 years. It might build 12 minutes at a time. I will recommend continued supervised contact, for now with therapeutic guidance. I will not recommend expansion before the hearing. Thank you, I said, and meant not just the information, but the way he offered it, like a steady rail on a set of stairs too steep for an old woman's knees. When I hung up, I pulled a legal pad toward me and started a list the way Parker does. Boxes and all. Authenticate letter. James to file expert notice Monday. In-camera interview request. Judge hears girls briefly. Witness prep. Walter, Barry, Harris, Mitchell. Schedule times. Boundary violations. School fence photos. Submit. Lease cosign. Move to disclose potential bias of Sullivan. Home study. Subpoena full file. Challenge scope. At the bottom, I wrote something you can't file. Hold the line. I slept in fits. Woke, slept, woke. Each time I checked the driveway through the slit in the curtain. Empty, quiet. My own truck doing its best impression of a guard dog. Toward dawn, I dreamed I was drawing a line with a carpenter's pencil across a sheet of plywood. Hand steady, weight forward. Someone tried to bump my elbow and I kept the line straight anyway. Sunday was meant to be rest. We made it active rest. Church for Walter. We sent coffee cake and our love. The 3 of us repaired the screen on the porch, where Summer insists on sneaking in. Emma took apart the latch and put it back together better. Claire painted the new wood to match the old wood in strokes, that made no fuss about being perfect, and nonetheless approached it. In the afternoon, James stopped by unannounced but welcome, a stack of forms like a magician's deck. "Affidavit for you," he said, sliding pages onto the kitchen table. "Short, clean, factual. No adjectives we haven't earned." We sat elbow to elbow and I told the truth, like a woman who isn't afraid of the light. When we got to the paragraph about the letter, James tapped his pen. "We'll attach it under seal," he said. "Not public, not fodder. Just the line in ink and an explanation of context." "Context," I repeated, tasting the word. "Like how grief can trick a man into believing he's doing a kindness when in fact he's making a wound." "Exactly," he said, and I was grateful for a lawyer who speaks human. He packed up, then hesitated at the door, which is not his habit. "Margaret, I know this feels like the ground is tilting," he said. "The home study, the chip, the experts lined up. That's not a death knell. It's a story. We're just going to tell a better one with more pages and less wishful thinking." After he left, I stood a while in the doorway, hand on the frame, the way my husband used to check the weather with his skin. The air had that late-day gold in it that makes even a dented truck look blessed. At dusk, we drove to the creek. Emma skipped stones until one did a ridiculous 7 hops, and she pretended she hadn't been counting. Claire sat on the bank and drew cattails that might make a poet jealous. I leaned against a cedar and thought about all the lines you draw in a life. Fence lines, fault lines, ink lines, the plumb line you try to keep your heart hanging from. The phone buzzed once in my pocket. A calendar notification from Parker. Hearing confirmed. Tuesday, 9 a.m. Judge Alan Mercer. My reflection in the black glass looked like an old scarecrow who'd learned how to listen. Back home, we did bedtime. Teeth, light clicks, the door left cracked just so. I stood between their rooms again, hand on each jamb, and felt the house holding them the way it has for 8 years. Quietly, without bragging, right up to the line. In the kitchen, I slid the letter back into its envelope, and the envelope back into the briefcase. I clicked the brass clasps, that small sound that means a thing is kept. Then I wrote one more list, just for me. Wake early, pack folder. Kiss their heads even if they duck. Wear the jacket with the soft elbows. Tell the truth. Hold the line. Monday woke me before the alarm. The house holding its breath the way houses do when weather is thinking about a change. The radio muttered about a front dropping fast. Gusts. A chance of outages. Creeks out of their banks if the rain parked itself in the wrong mood. I made coffee strong enough to reason with and stood a while at the sink, watching the wind try out the trees like a tailor with a measuring tape. At 7:12, Parker called. "Change of plans," he said without preamble. Opposing filed an ex parte motion at 6:59 a.m. They want expanded visitation today. Unsupervised dinner. Arguing yesterday went smoothly. And the home study says safe environment. Today, I said, feeling the day shorten in my hands. "Car," he said. "Judge Mercer will hear quick argument. The main hearing is still Tuesday at 9 Guarre, but they're testing doors. Bring the folder. I'll file our opposition before noon. I want Marcus on standby to speak by phone." I hung up, packed lunches, and told the girls there might be a storm later, and to keep their phones charged. In the driveway, I put my hand on each of their shoulders before they ducked into the bus. "I love you. I'll see you after practice," I said, because the only useful magic in a world like this is repetition of the good things. By 10, I was at James's office, and the sky had turned the color of unripe plums. We spread our paper fort across his desk. He worked with a speed that didn't look hurried. "Here's our ask," he said, tapping the top of a motion with his nailed-down pen. "No expansion before the main hearing. Continued supervised contact only with the counselor present. In the alternative, a caution against any approach at school. And I'm attaching Rachel's notes about the lease co-signed to preserve our objection if Sullivan tries to present herself as independent. "Will Judge Mercer care about the lease?" I asked. "He'll care about full disclosure," he said, "and about whether anyone's been casual with lines." Walked across to the courthouse at 1:45. The steps were slick with a spit of rain that hadn't decided whether to commit. David stood beneath, the awning with Rebecca Sullivan, the associate whose suit belonged in a glossy magazine about lives I do not lead. She saw me see her and lifted her chin as if she were allergic to weather. She had the look of a woman who believes a well-pressed line is a moral victory. Inside, Judge Alan Mercer looked like I want a judge to look, mildly impatient with theater, careful with the edges of words. He read the papers in front of him like they were not strangers. "Counsel," he said to James first, which I took as a small mercy. "Your Honor," James said. Yesterday's contact was appropriate because it was supervised, brief, and thoughtfully structured. Expanding to unsupervised dinner less than 24 hours later is the definition of haste. The children have lived with Mrs. Halpin for 8 years. Continuity is the beating heart of this case. We respectfully ask you to maintain the current arrangement until tomorrow's full hearing. Sullivan stood like an ad for herself. "Your Honor, my client has maintained sobriety for over 2 years, is stably housed, and has a preliminary home study approval. The girls responded well yesterday." James lifted a finger, and the judge nodded to him. "There's no record before the court of how the girls responded," he said. "We can provide Mr. Reed, a licensed counselor, by phone for that purpose, and preliminary is a word that does not mean conclusive." Mercer steepled his fingers, took off his glasses, put them back on. A man accustomed to the rhythm of carefulness. "Ms. Sullivan, are you Rebecca Sullivan of Whitcomb and Crane?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Are you also the co-signer on Mr. Morse's lease?" "A beat too long." "Yes, Your Honor," she said finally, like the word had splinters. "That creates a potential that you may be a witness should the nature of that arrangement be relevant," Mercer said. "You're allowed to proceed today, but I'll expect a disclosure on the record at the full hearing. If I find I need testimony from you, you will not also be counsel. Understood?" Sullivan nodded in a way that wanted to be a bow. Mercer dialed Marcus in open court, on a speaker that made everyone sound a little farther away than they were. He kept it clinical and human as promised. Supervised contact appropriate. Girls guarded but not distressed. Recommendation to maintain the structure a little while longer. When he hung up, Mercer ruled like a man who likes to have his reasons stacked. Motioned to expand to unsupervised. "Denied for now," he said. "However, I will order 1 additional supervised hour this evening at the community center with Mr. Reed present, since it appeared to do some good, and to avoid heightening tensions before tomorrow. No contact at school, no approach at the residence. We will address all of this more fully at the hearing. Court is adjourned." We walked out into rain that had finally decided. Under the overhang, David stood with his arms folded like hugging himself. Was a way not to reach for anyone else. He didn't look at me, which was maybe the kindest thing he could have done. Sullivan checked her watch like time worked for her. Back at the truck, my phone buzzed twice. First from Officer Warren. "Just a heads up. False alarm calls tend to spike before hearings. We'll filter. Call me if you get a visit." Second from the power company. "Weather advisory. Possible outages this evening. Prepare accordingly." I read both and thought about the word warning and how often it arrives too politely. By 5, the sky had gone green around the edges. We drove to room B again. Marcus set the timer. I set my jaw. The visit was a copy of the first, but thinner, as if everyone had used up their courage the day before. Emma said little, which felt like exactly enough. Claire drew the rain on the windows and left the people for later. When the timer chirped, David surprised me by asking Marcus, not me, May I give them a ride home on Saturday if the court allows? Just something ordinary? Marcus said. That's for the court. And then softer. We're in the business of building ordinary back up one brick at a time. Out in the lot, the storm found a gear. The wind came down like a decision. By the time we turned off the highway, branches littered the road like a story you couldn't finish. A limb big as a woman had torn free and lay across the lane just past Walter's mailbox. We idled, hazards blinking. Emma climbed out, shoulders squared against the rain, and we wrestled the limb to the ditch. 3 pairs of hands turning something stubborn into something passable. Claire held the flashlight and pointed where the world needed to see. We got home to a house that sighed when it saw us. 10 minutes later, the light snapped off and the refrigerator coughed into silence. There it is, I said, like we'd been waiting for a guest who always shows up empty-handed. The girls groaned and then got about the business of making do. Candles, the big flashlight, the radio with the crank, the blanket that lives on the back of the couch for no reason until it has one. Walter knocked with a battery lantern that could have guided ships. Yours, he said, shoving it at me. And I brought bread. Bread is morale. We ate chili by candlelight, which made it taste like a story I would tell them later about this night and the way we made it small. The girls took turns reading out loud from the book that has somehow become our nighttime companion. Nothing fancy, just a woman and a dog and the problem of a fence that won't keep rabbits out. Halfway through Chapter 4, the radio mentioned our road by name. Downed lines through midnight. Cruise triaging. The phone vibrated on the table like it wanted to run away. Rachel. Heads up. The psychiatrist in their packet. He never treated him. He reviewed a one-time evaluation attached to a rehab exit note. Self-reported. Language is careful. Appears. Suggests. Within reasonable limits. Sending you the public CV and the letterhead. Also, home study preliminary approval is a checklist, plus a single 30-minute walkthrough. No long-form narrative yet. I forwarded to Parker, who texted back in the glow of my candle. Perfect. I'll argue weight versus admissibility. Tomorrow we stick to continuity and risk of abrupt change. Sleep if you can. I can't, I said to the empty kitchen and then corrected myself. Remembering the house is never empty if you respect what it holds. At 9, Officer Warren idled by to make sure our dark house was merely dark. He tapped the horn once like a friendly cough and went on. The girls fell asleep on the couch under the blanket, heads in opposite directions, the way sisters invent geometry. I draped another quilt and stood a moment, a sentry with a bad back and a stubborn heart. The power came back at 10:18, with the shy click of things deciding to be themselves again. I shut off the lantern and the candles and let the ordinary yellow lamps do their work. In the quiet, the refrigerator started humming, as if it had missed us. I went to the kitchen table and laid out tomorrow, like tools on a bench. Folder of affidavits, tabs neat as fence pickets, Marcus's note, Warren's call logs, Harris's attendance and her letter that reads like a woman who trusts what she's seen, Dr. Mitchell's calm sentences, Barry's affidavit with his careful uphill hand, Rachel's report with its unromantic facts, the photograph of the clipboard with the word preliminary clear as a warning sign, the lease with Sullivan's name sitting beside David's like 2 notes that don't harmonize, the red-topped envelope with the line in ink that I have carried like a small, necessary weight. I ironed my shirt again because nerves wrinkle what you don't even wear. I found the scarf my husband had insisted I keep for the occasions life throws at women who would rather stay home and fix what's broken on their own property. I'm not a scarf woman, but I know the value of a signal when the room is made of strangers and judgment. Upstairs, I stepped between their doors one more time. Emma's cap hung on the bedpost like a red promise. Claire's sketchbook lay open to the window, drawing with the rain done in strokes that made the glass look like wet music. I touched the frame of each door, the way a woman might lay hands on a blessing she didn't earn and intends to honor. Back in the kitchen, the radio finally shut up about flood stages and moved on to the farm report, which is the closest thing we have out here to poetry that pays. I clicked it off and listened to the house breathe. Tomorrow would be a room with chairs and rules, and a judge who likes his reasons stacked. I would bring mine. Before bed, I wrote one more note in my crooked hand and taped it to the inside of the front door, because sometimes the future needs a reminder from the past. Girls, wake me if I'm not up. Shirt on the chair, folder by the door. We'll eat early. We'll go together. We'll tell the truth. I slept like a woman hiding from a storm that's already passed, which is to say, badly and enough. At 4:52, thunder strolled off into somebody else's county. At 5:01, the coffee pot began its good work, and the kitchen smelled like resolve. I stood with the briefcase open and placed the envelope on top of everything else, not because it should go first, but because when a morning asks you who you are, you ought to be able to answer without looking. We had weather behind us and a room ahead. The line in ink waited for its moment. The day lifted its gray face and said in its way, well. Tuesday began the way serious days do, too early, too quiet. I made pancakes to give our nerves something to do besides tremble. Emma ate 2 and pretended she wanted a 3rd. Claire drowned hers in syrup, like she was practicing abundance. We left the kitchen clean, because coming home to order felt like a thing I could promise. The courthouse had that morning smell of paper and floor cleaner and ambition. Parker met us on the steps, tie straight, mouth a line that meant he'd packed his worry away where it couldn't trip his feet. Judge Mercer will take the in-camera interview first, he said, crouching to the girl's height just enough to count as kindness. 5 quiet minutes each. No lawyers. He'll ask simple questions. You answer simple truths. Then you get to go with Walter for milkshakes, while your grandma and I finish the hard part. They nodded like women told they'd have to cross a creek stone by stone. Walter squeezed my arm. I'll be right outside, he said. Pie later. Pie solves nothing and helps everything. The girls disappeared through a door with a bailiff who looked like he understood how to be gentle in rooms that didn't always deserve it. The hallway emptied, then filled with the wrong people all at once. David, small in a navy suit. Rebecca Sullivan, jacket like a blade. A woman I recognized from Sunday, Marcus, the counselor. And behind them, a man with a neat beard and an expression that didn't quite risk being human. Dr. Averill, Sullivan said to the clerk when he signed the book, as if the name should mean anything to anyone but his invoice. The girls came back 5 minutes older. Emma's jaw was set. Claire's eyes were clear. He had a candy dish. Caleb reported the way a person tells you a mountain had a trail, and so everything was technically possible. I touched the brim of Emma's cap where it peeks from her pocket. No hats in court, and said, "Good work, sweetheart." Then they went with Walter, trailing courage and the want of chocolate. Inside, Judge Mercer called the case like he was saying, Grace Habit-Making Ceremony. Morse versus Halpern. Petition for custody modification. We rose, sat, became our official selves. Sullivan went first, building a scaffolding from words. Sobriety for 2 years. A tidy 1-bedroom with working detectors and food in the fridge. A job with regular hours. A sponsor. Meetings logged like miles. She introduced Dr. Averill as an expert who had reviewed the rehab discharge summary and conducted a 1-hour interview last week. The doctor's testimony was an armchair built from cautious phrases. Within normal limits. No current evidence of prognosis favorable. Safe words that sound like medicine and land like air. James didn't waste cross-examination on thunder. "Doctor," he said, "you didn't treat Mr. Morse." "No." "You did not observe his parenting." "No." "You reviewed a discharge summary where he self-reported his symptoms." "Yes." "And your interview was conducted in the presence of his Counsel, he hesitated before the truth. Yes? Thank you, James said, and sat, letting the hollow of his credentials show itself. Marcus testified next. Cool water in a room trying to be a forge. The children are bonded and stable in Mrs. Halpern's care, he said. They were polite, guarded, and appropriate with their father in 2 supervised sessions. I recommend continued therapeutic supervision and no abrupt change before the court hears full evidence. Miss Harris came with attendance charts and the kind of calm you can't rent. Dr. Mitchell brought immunization, records, and sentence after measured sentence that made the girls sound like exactly what they are. Healthy, attached, steady. Barry Hill told the court about a booth at 3 p.m. and a number with 2, many zeros, and a man who didn't flinch when he said it. Officer, Warren put his big hands on a small Bible and swore to call logs, and to the way custody fights pull prank calls behind them like tin. Cans, every piece added, weight to the same side of the scale. Still, a courtroom is a place where even the obvious has to dress up. When it was our turn, James stood with that steady forward posture he uses when he's going to put a nail exactly where he means to. Your Honor, he said, we don't argue Mr. Morse is a monster. We argue that the girl's life with Mrs. Halpern is a slow-built good. The law favors continuity where continuity fosters health. Abrupt change is a risk not justified by a preliminary stamp and a careful doctor's adjectives. He clicked his pen and then gently set a red-topped evidence envelope on the table. The room changed temperature. We moved to admit Exhibit F under seal, he said. A letter written by Mr. Morse, 8 years ago in his own hand, relinquishing the girls to Mrs. Halpern. We offer it not to punish an old harm, but to establish history, context, and Margaret's good faith reliance in raising these children as her own. He tapped the corner. We will authenticate the handwriting. Sullivan was on her feet before the paper finished settling. Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay, relevance, undue prejudice. My client asserts the letter was written under duress and intoxication. Our expert will testify the handwriting analysis is inconclusive. Mercer looked at the envelope like a man considering a tool that could save a job or split a thumb. Statement against interest, James said, calm, and relevance to the equities of custody. Mrs. Halpern's reliance and the children's settled life. As to intoxication, we can address that on cross. Mercer's eyes went to David, then back to the envelope. I'll admit it under seal, subject to wait after testimony, he said. Proceed. James didn't flourish. He opened the envelope like a person who knows paper can change worlds. The letter came out thin and familiar. My breath stuttered the way a truck's idle does when the carburetor decides to think about old times. Mr. Morse, James said, voice softer now. Do you recognize this? David's eyes were on his hands. Yes. Is it your handwriting? Yes. Did anyone force you to write it? He lifted his face. No. Were you intoxicated when you wrote it? A pause that tried to be longer than the court would allow. No, he said finally, and the word held. What was your state of mind? Shattered, he said, and I believed him, but sober. I wrote it in the morning. I thought I was being merciful, which is the strangest kind of selfishness. Sullivan stood like she'd been stung. Objection to characterization, she snapped. Sustained, Mercer said mildly. The last sentence is stricken. Mr. Parker, stay in the lane. James nodded. Why did you write it? Because every day I looked at them, I heard Michelle dying again, he said. Voice now just a thread that nonetheless reached the back row. I thought they'd be safer with Margaret than with me. I left because I was a coward. I left them because I thought love could be delegated. The room had the silence you only get in places built to hold words. James made the smallest motion toward the counselor's table. No further questions, he said. Sullivan approached like a woman walking on gravel in good shoes. Mr. Morse, she said. "Today you are sober." "Yes." "You have a job." "Yes." "You have a home." "Yes." "And you love your girls?" "Yes." "And you want to be their father?" He looked at her, then at the judge. "I want to be their father in a way that doesn't break them to fix me," he said. And if that wasn't an answer written by God on a post-it, I don't know what is. Sullivan pivoted, finding safe ground. No further questions. She called her last witness, a home study worker, who testified that the apartment had beds, food, and a lock that worked. Preliminary approval, she repeated like a charm. James handled her with tongs. Respectful, brief, conceding the check marks and taking away their sparkle. Then it was just us and the judge and the kind of quiet that decides things. "Counsel," Mercer said. "Closing." Sullivan built hers with phrases meant to sound like fairness. Second chances, restored capacity, the state's interest in reunifying families. She asked for expanded visitation now, unsupervised weekends within a month, and a path to shared custody. James didn't bother with adjectives, Your Honor. The law's North Star in this courtroom is the best interests of the children, he said. Those interests are not abstract. They are specifically these girls whose lives have been steady and good, with Mrs. Halpin for 8 years. Mr. Morse has taken steps. We do not minimize them. But steps are not a bridge. We ask you to preserve what works, to expand slowly only as stability allows, and to recognize that love sometimes looks like patience. Mercer took off his glasses and cleaned them with a handkerchief he produced like a magician from nowhere. He replaced them and looked down at his notes, as if the words might arrange themselves into the right order if he stared long enough. "Here is what we will do," he said at last. "The petition to modify. Custody is denied at this time. The court finds that the children's best interests are served by remaining in Mrs. Halpin's primary care. The court orders continued supervised visitation for Mr. Morse, weekly at the community center with Mr. Reed observing. After 8 weeks upon Mr. Reed's recommendation, and absent adverse events, we may consider a trial expansion to a daytime unsupervised visit of limited duration. Contact at school is prohibited. Contact at the residence is prohibited. All communications go through counsel." He paused, and my ribs remembered how to move. "As to the letter," he continued, flicking a glance at the red-topped envelope, "the court does not base today's decision on it alone. However, its existence and Mr. Morse's testimony regarding its creation speak to the history that Mrs. Halpin reasonably relied upon. The court will keep it under seal." He turned to Sullivan. "Ms. Sullivan, your future participation is subject to your firm addressing the conflict posed by your co-signing the lease. You may not be both a witness and counsel. Resolve that before we reconvene." Sullivan's jaw moved once, a woman chewing something that didn't want to be swallowed. "Finally," Mercer said, "I commend Mr. Morse for his sobriety and for the restraint he has shown in supervised settings. The door to more is not closed. It is simply narrow and slow, as is appropriate when children's lives are at issue." The gavel didn't bang. It merely landed and the room's temperature changed again, this time like a fever breaking. We stood there for a second, all of us, as if the floor might give back the hours it had taken. Then the bailiff called the next case, and we were suddenly just people in a hallway. In the corridor, David stood with his hands wrapped around his arms, the way a person holds a fragile package. He looked at me, and the old ache walked through my chest like it paid rent. "Thank you," he said, and the words were strange and right, "for not turning the letter into a knife." "I didn't save it for punishment," I said. "I saved it because sometimes a truth needs a body to wear when it goes into a room." He nodded at that as if he'd been waiting for a sentence he could live with. "I'll make the most of the time I have," he said. "I won't knock at your door." "Good," I said. "The girls need doors that only open one way for a while." James touched my elbow. business getting back into its boots. "We'll paper this order and get Mr. Reed's cadence set," he said. "I want the first 8 visits to be boring." "Boring sounds like heaven," I said. We found Walter and the girls at the diner. Chocolate mustaches on both of them that no judge could rule against. Emma looked at me like a woman measuring her footing on a ridge. "Well?" she asked. "We keep doing what we've been doing," I said. "And your dad gets to say hello on Saturdays with Mr. Reed watching. No school, no house." She exhaled, and some part of the girlishness that the morning had sanded away came back. Claire slid a sketch across the table. 4 figures around a circle again, the line under ours darker, his still light but thicker than last time. "Looks right," I said, and meant it with a gratitude I don't have clever words for. When we got home, the afternoon had gone out into a bright that felt like permission. Officer Warren idled by, tipped 2 fingers from his hat, the code for I heard. In the mailbox was nothing of consequence, which felt like a miracle. I put the red-topped envelope back in the safe I'd bolted into the stud under the stairs after the burglary 2 summers back, between the title to the truck and my husband's ring that I still can't bring myself to wear on a chain. I shut it with the soft grind of metal on purpose. In the yard, we tossed a ball until the dog 2 farms over decided to show us how a tail should be chased. We laughed like people who had been in a room where laughter would have been a mistrial. Inside, I made grilled cheese and did not burn it. Small victory. We set the table, said our short grace, ate the food. Later, when the house found its nighttime breathing, I sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad and wrote a new list that wasn't for court. Saturday. Bring sketchbook. Bring quarters for the juice machine. Bring patience. Call Marcus Friday. Check on the girl's feelings about saying hello again. Ask Emma about the new grip coat showed her. Frame Claire's rain window drawing for the hall. Drop bread at David's apartment without a note the first time I think to. Then decide not to. Let Grace be letting the counselor carry the messages for a while. I added 1 more line at the bottom, the same as before, just to see it there in my own crooked hand. Hold the line. When I turned off the light, the window showed me my reflection for a second. An old woman with a serviceable scarf and a soft-elbowed jacket, and a spine that remembered how to stay straight when a room asked it to. Upstairs, the girls settled like contented houses. The storm had spent itself yesterday. Tomorrow would be made, like all good things, of habits. The letter remained in the dark, not as a threat, but as a record. The truth had worn it into court and come back alive. That was enough for a night.